Grab a cup of tea or a glass of wine and tune in for Inspired Conversations with publisher Linda Joy. On Tuesdays at 2 p.m. Eastern, Linda creates sacred space for leading female luminaries, empowering authors, heart-centered female entrepreneurs, coaches, and healers. A soulful venue where guests openly share the fears and obstacles they've overcome, wisdom and lessons learned, and the personal journey that led them to the transformational work they do in the world. Inspired Conversations to empower you on your path to authentic, soulful living.
Welcome to Inspired Conversations. I'm your host, Mindset Elevation Coach Linda Joy, publisher of the beloved Aspire magazine, which is celebrating 20 years of inspiring, empowering, and supporting women to live their best lives. If you haven't grabbed your free subscription, and yes, it's still free, my friends, you can go to subscribe to aspire.com. You know, if you've been with me on this journey and listening to this show for the decade that I've been on the air, you know one of my favorite sayings is, life unfolds for me with ease, grace, and flow. And it's one of my favorite sayings because it's helped me recalibrate my whole life. I used to be one that needed to micromanage the divine and really control things. And all that did was bring me out of alignment with my peace, my joy, and more. So I am so excited about today's topic, which is flow. And with me today is Laurie Smith, an inspirational author, speaker, and intuitive coach who has been working in the fields of creativity and personal growth for 25 years. She's the author of several books, including the one I have in my hand right now, The Flow Habit, Creating Peace, Passion, Purpose in Everyday Miracles, which was just released by Hay House, which is an imprint of Penguin Random House. Since 2000, Laurie has led hundreds of people around the world in her free 28-day flow challenges. She's currently on a mission to spread the word about the transformational power of everyday flow. Laurie, welcome, my friend.
Thank you. I am so happy to be here.
I'll tell you, there's a beautiful energy. You know, when I got your book in the mail, and I get so many in the mail, there's a beautiful energy in this book, along with the wisdom and the message. But I can feel your intention. And as I was reading through, I'm like, girl, she's getting on my show. We got to talk about this. So let's talk and define what flow is for the listeners who may be going, I want that, but I don't really know what it is. How do you define flow?
Well, there's two ways I define flow, and they're really one and the same. But the first is very personal, and it's how we feel when we are doing something where we're fully locked into what we're doing. And it's been called the flow state. It was first identified by a psychologist called Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. But that's the feeling when the rest of the world falls away and we lose track of time and we sometimes forget where we are. We're not feeling self-conscious at all, or if we are, a lot less than we usually do. And we're doing something often that brings us joy. It's what little kids feel when they're playing and they're just completely oblivious to the people around them. They're building blocks, or we might feel it when we're painting or doing our favorite hobby or talking to a friend. So it's that intimate individual experience of flow. And what I have found in my own journey and in leading these 28-day flow challenges, which I know we'll get into, but in talking to people all around the world about when we do that more intentionally, when we seek out experiences like that, and we follow our intuition and flow, the intimate experience of flow is a very, very intuitive one, because for your listeners, if they know that feeling when they're doing something that brings them joy, often we're not thinking about what to do next, right? We know where to move our paintbrush. We don't know how we know where to move it next, but we just do. Or the little kid knows exactly what it's going to take to keep that pile of blocks balanced just so. And we take that intuitive, the more we nurture that and seek experiences like that, where we feel flow, the flow state, um, it filters out. And what I've found in my groups and all the people I've been interviewing and experimenting with this in my own life, that's when we feel this greater flow. This flow, Linda, that you were describing, it's like, that ease, that joy, where synchronicities happen. Like the
Mhm.
synchronicities that led to me being on this call, the synchronicities that led me to publishing my book, the synchronicities that lead us to find each other. I like to say, to remember that the world is big and there are so many amazing, magnificent people out there. And sometimes we can feel stuck in our lives. And when we're feeling stuck, our experience is often very small and very dark. And we think that what we see before our eyes is it, or the people in our lives, this finite group, that's it. And then when we get into the state of flow in little moments, we start to feel more expansive just in those few moments. And the more that we experience flow and invite flow into our lives and work with the flow state, we start to discover that, oh my gosh, it's an innate experience that has all the rules that we need to get our lives to flow, to find each other, to find those just right friends that might be on the other side of the world, but are also resonating with their own intuition. And somehow that's what I call the circle of flow. And that's when life really starts to pick up speed and feel miraculous and lead to little, what I call, and it's in the subtitle of the book, everyday miracles.
Well, I one of my things that lights me up is I believe that miracles are within reach for all of us. I've experienced many, and it goes back to what you just said, is when we're in flow, my definition is flow is, I like to use the infinity symbol, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
universal flow. And when we are caught up in our ego, fears, etc., and we pinch that infinity symbol, right? We pinch it and stop the flow. That's when all the fears and the critic stuff all comes up. For me, what I noticed was when I trust in that flow and I step into it, um, what ends up happening is all the synchronicities that you mentioned
Mm-hmm.
start to flow in.
Mm-hmm.
Have you noticed that too?
Absolutely. So now feels like a good time to just tell you a little bit about how the flow challenges started, because they're personal, and that's sort of when the synchronicities started flowing in. Um, I was at a point in my life at the start of the pandemic, as I know so many of us were, where I was feeling very anxious. It was in those first days of the lockdown where we didn't know what would happen. And when you mentioned ego, my ego was screaming loud. That's what happens when we get into fight or flight. But I also was at a point in my life where I was feeling very stuck. I was feeling, even though I was still coaching and teaching and had been writing courses, I felt like I was separate from my very best self. And it was very practical. My kids were coming up to me asking questions, and I was feeling off center, like I couldn't show up for them the way I wanted to. And so I decided that I was going to do something every day, just a few minutes a day, that helped me get into flow. Flow is a concept that I was very aware of from my early days of training as a coach and studying human performance and potential. And so for me, that activity was writing. When I was a little girl, even at age 6, I remember, writing fiction books, and it was core to who I was. And often that's a clue. The activities that get us into flow might seem impractical or unrelated, but they're often really get to the core of our purpose and that sparkle that makes us who we are. And so I just started writing just 5 to 10 minutes. And I didn't tell my I didn't tell my husband, I didn't tell my kids, I didn't tell my family. I just did it for me. I kept it really sacred in the beginning. And after the first few days, though, I started realizing how much better I was feeling. I started feeling this lightness, this brightness, and I started getting excited about life again and feeling more empowered. And so not only did I tell my family, but I also told some of my best friends, people that were also creative and I knew would understand. And then friends told friends. And slowly we had this community of people that were all experimenting with flow. We were all doing that by choosing a 5 to 10 minute activity that we each intuitively felt led to do. And the only criteria was that we enjoyed doing it. We loved doing it. It made us sparkle. And it had a high chance of getting us into flow. We might not have gotten into the flow state ever as we were doing it during the challenge, but that's okay. It still had everything that we needed. It had the potential of that. And then over time, I started sharing it on Facebook, and then I started sharing it on Instagram. And soon before I knew it, I had hundreds of people, mostly women, all around the world participating in my 28-day flow challenge. But what was so magical, because your question was about synchronicities, was the people that showed up. You know, the people, I had people from India and Kenya, and I have a beautiful woman who's still part of my community from Ireland, who now I can't imagine my flow community not having her in it. And she sang, she has a beautiful melodious voice, and she sang at my Zoom launch party for the book. And somehow that's what happens. That's what happens where, we put it out there, and then we work with our own, we really get in the minutia, and we look at ourselves and we feel vulnerable, and we're honest with ourselves about those areas that aren't flowing. And we see stuckness as a seed for miracles. And we stay with the stuckness and work with the stuckness. And we do something that I call find your way in the way that works for you when it comes to getting back into flow. And when we do that, it's absolutely amazing. And there's these connections. So during one flow challenge, there was a woman who was a musician, and she chose to do, always her activity was always something with music. And one day I got an email from her, and she said, this morning I woke up to do my flow habit, and for whatever reason, I felt like I wanted to sketch. And so I sketched these little drawings, and I always invite people to share their stories with me. And I say, I won't tell anyone unless you give me permission. And she says, please do not share this photo of my drawing with your community. But it just felt important to show you. And what she didn't know was that earlier that day on Instagram, a woman from another part of the world had messaged me, who was also doing the flow challenge, and she was working through a very difficult experience in her life, and she had had a dream the night before, a breakthrough dream, one of those miraculous dreams. And she told me the dream in the message, and the imagery in her dream was exactly what the other woman, the musician, felt called to draw when she woke up that morning. And the
Oh my
two had
God.
never met. They didn't even know of each other. They didn't know that they were each doing the 28-day flow challenge. But that is that infinity of flow that you're talking about, that there is
Oh,
this invisible connection, an invisible flow connecting us all when we make that choice that we're going to show up and we're going to do the next best thing. We're just going to do a little
oh my
baby
God.
step that's aligned.
I I love divine synchronicities. I live my life
Mm-hmm.
that way, and that one was powerful. It tells you that we're all connected, my friend. We're going to
Mm-hmm.
take our first break, and I want you to visit Laurie at lauriesmith.com. Grab a copy of The Flow Habit while you're there and learn more about everything she is bringing forth into the world. We can all use a little more flow in our lives, my friends. We'll be right back.
Are you ready to reinvent your life on your terms? Midlife women, it's time to get off autopilot and co-create your dream life. Midlife transformation guides Beth Myers and Kim Gore are passionate about guiding women to discover adventure in their own lives and to become deliberate co-creators of their dreams using mindset, belief and energy clearing, and compassionate guidance and coaching. They know firsthand what it takes to transform your life from surviving to thriving because they've done it. Today, their dream life consists of being full-time travelers in their rolling home and exploring, connecting, speaking, and creating sacred community gatherings with other lightworkers around the country, both in person and virtually. Midlife women, if you're ready to release your limiting stories, reclaim your inner light, and rediscover the joy within, visit you2canthrive.com. That's the letter U and the number 2, canthrive.com.
Welcome back. You're listening to Inspired Conversations. You're circling up with me, host Linda Joy, and Laurie Smith, author of The Flow Habit. And when you were sharing that story about these two members of your flow community not even being connected in the physical realms, right, of knowing each other and being connected that way, but I believe, as it sounds like you do, we are all connected in the source of flow, which is divine source energy. And when we step into it and remain in that energy, those are the synchronicities that happen. And then, we're human, life happens. Sometimes we find ourselves out of flow, right? That's when the fears, the inner critic, I call it the muck, right? The muck comes up to say, hey, I used to look at when the muck comes up, Laurie, as, oh, I'm failing at figuring this out. Now I go, oh, thank you for showing me another unhealed layer so I can get back into flow. What's your thoughts on that too?
Well, I love this, and in studying flow, there's something that Herbert Benson identified, and he called it the breakout principle. And he looked at peak states like flow, the flow state, the actual intimate experience of being in flow. And what he noticed in his research was that there's a cycle that we all go through, and it starts with feeling this stuck feeling. And then he said there's a release that leads to a peak state, and then we have to recalibrate and integrate what just happened into the new normal. And this was embraced as the flow cycle. And so it's been repopularized as the flow cycle. But as I was looking at it and all of the data that exists, I love research. So you probably noticed my book is filled with footnotes, and I reviewed hundreds and hundreds of peer-reviewed research. But my primary focus in everything is I'm a coach. And I'm also looking for how to apply all of this information in my own life to make my life better. So as I was looking at the flow cycle, I realized that a few things. One, that we can get stuck in the struggle. We can the more we fight it, right? The more our ego gets involved. I know a lot of people, and I know times in my own life where struggle became my new normal, and I didn't go through the phases. And I realized the key to how to get from struggle to finding our way to flow is acceptance. And it's kind of like what you're saying. We take a beat and we notice mindfully that we're in struggle. And the mind wants to analyze it and figure out why we're in struggle and, have a 5-point strategy for how to get ourselves out. But the key to changing our state is acceptance. And in my research of flow and also my own work as a coach, this idea of emotional safety is something that has been overlooked and often dismissed even when it comes to the flow state, how important it is in helping us get into flow. And sometimes we don't have the blessing of being in a situation where we feel emotionally safe. But the key to getting our lives to flow is to learn how to create that emotional safety for ourselves. And so I came up with a new version of Herbert Benson's breakout principle, which is, I call it the safer flow cycle. And I use the word safer because not only to remind ourselves that emotional safety is key when it comes to flow, because we're often taught, push, stretch, like that's the way of the world, right? But it's also important to remember and do that from a place of feeling emotionally safe within ourselves. But also, I believe that, as Herbert Benson's principle showed that it's the rest phase, which is at the end, is when we integrate our new normal, because we're all always evolving and the purpose of life is to grow. And so we feel stuck, and we have those stuck moments in our lives and those struggle moments when we're fighting ourselves or fighting other people, because there's some spark, there's some sparkle in us, whatever we want to call that, that's calling to us to grow, right? And calling to us that there's something more that you have to offer to the world than fighting in the muck in this way, right? And so the safer flow cycle is, it starts with struggle, because that's part of life. Being in a seed, we have to break out of seed. Struggle happens when we're learning a new skill. It doesn't necessarily have to be a bad struggle, but it can be uncomfortable, right? When we're doing something where we don't completely have the skill mastered yet, it can be hard to get into flow. So struggle can take many forms. And then we accept. And in that acceptance phase, I developed what I call an I feel meditation, that's just saying, I feel angry, and it's okay. And we sit with it, and then we say, I feel, and we see how the feeling evolves. I feel frustrated, and it's okay. So it's really accepting where we are is how we create the springboard for flow, because that's where we create the emotional safety for ourselves, to allow that soft, still voice within to guide us. And the next phase in the safer flow cycle is find a way. And this is another thing that often gets missed in how flow is communicated about. And it is that the key to flow is intrinsic motivation, which means that flow is an inside job. Flow requires listening to our own spark and following where it leads. And so find a way your way. I mean, I have so much information in the book about all different ways we can get into flow. And I include so many stories, and that's with purpose, because we each have our own unique formula for flow. We each have our own unique pathway. We each have our own unique activities that make us sparkle, like writing for me, and we each have our own unique activities that will work in different situations and in different moments of our lives, right? And that's why I always encourage people, choose your own activity, listen to your own intuition. So the find a way starts with an F. That's the F in the safer flow cycle. And then the E is enjoy the moment. Eventually, if we stay with ourselves enough and we listen to our intuition, we can find bliss in the present moment. And whether that happens as a flow experience or another peak state, as Herbert Benson described, even mindfulness and just feeling like this moment is an everyday moment because the sun's shining so brightly, and the leaves are waving in such a way in the wind that it just feels miraculous. So the enjoy the moment is just being here now and enjoying the fruits of having gone through the other two phases, and then we rest, and that's the R. But I really believe that we rest with purpose. We remind ourselves that the reason we're resting is to recalibrate and integrate all the amazing things that we just achieved when we were in flow. With that E, that's enjoy flow as well, if it did indeed lead to a flow state. And we recalibrate. And then our soul often calls to us that, we're ready to grow in a new way. And, we might go into what feels like struggle, but really it's that call to stretch a little bit out of our comfort zone. And then we do it all again and again and again. And this is what life is, right? This is the seasons. This is the life cycle of a plant from a seed. This is the crazy ride that we're all on here on the world. So that's, as far as struggle, that's kind of the big picture of struggle. We could certainly talk about, I call myself a recovering perfectionist. And so I am constantly working with the inner voices and the inner critic. And I think that's why I'm doing this and why I'm teaching this. I'm very much, for many, many years, I taught and positioned myself more as an expert in my field as far as all the different modalities. And I always, my coaching practice is designed to help people uncover that spark. and follow where it leads in the world. And I love doing that. And um, I believe that everyone is an expert and everyone knows already the answers that they're seeking. And so that's why all throughout the book, I say again and again and again, it's the title of the exercises at the end of each chapter, you're already a flow expert. And that is true because flow is innate. It's nothing that we need to learn. It's nothing that an expert teacher needs to teach us necessarily. It's to awaken what we already know within. It's helpful to have the framework for flow, but really that's just, I say again and again, it's like when we make conscious what we're already doing unconsciously, that's when we have the power to dramatically change our lives. And so that's
It's
why,
so true.
yeah, that's
So
why
true.
it's like that's the key to flow, right? Is uncovering our own unique formula for flow and
And I
following where
love
it
that you
leads.
say everyone is a flow expert because
Mhm.
it's just us remembering that. We're going to
Mhm.
take our next break, Laurie, and when we come back, I want to talk about how we can develop a flow habit so we can change our lives. We'll be back in a moment, my friends. I'm with Laurie Smith of lauriesmith.com. Grab a copy of The Flow Habit and start creating peace, passion, purpose, and everyday miracles in your life. We'll be back in a moment.
Wellness isn't a trend, it's a return to what's always been true. Sherry Hone is a sought-after holistic healer, energy practitioner, and founder of Illuminate Your Potentials. She intuitively reads the signals your body sends, like fatigue, brain fog, or hormonal shifts, and traces them back to the emotional, energetic, and lifestyle patterns that help you understand yourself more deeply. With over 35 years of experience bridging science and spirit, she helps women uncover the hidden beliefs, emotional imprints, and ancestral patterns that shape their lives. Through her integrative, soul-centered work, programs, and offerings, Sherry guides women to remember who they are and live from that truth. Step into one of Sherry's guided spaces, including the Journey membership, Illuminate, a 4-month private mentorship for energetic recalibration and more. Book your complimentary discovery call at sherryhone.com.
Welcome back. You're listening to Inspired Conversations. I'm with Laurie Smith, author of The Flow Habit. She's an inspirational author, speaker, and intuitive coach. So, Laurie, I love that because I believe the same thing. It's really a remembering. We've forgotten that we're part of the flow, I call divine source energy. There's so many different words for it. And it sounds as if in your language, you're just reminding everyone that they have this connection to flow too, even though they may think they don't. So I think that's so important for women to realize. So, how can we develop a flow habit change, right? Or how can it change our lives when we create that habit? You've touched a little bit about it opens up to divine synchronicities. It opens us up to trusting more of our own wisdom. What else would you like to share about that?
Well, I think the first is noticing, right? Noticing those moments when we or other people are in flow. And I like to say, look for the sparkles. Look for the sparkle in people's eyes when they're talking about things that they're passionate about. We can see the light, right? Or look for the sparkle, visit a playground or, attend a musical performance or and look for the sparkle of the performance for the performer's eyes. They might, or the sound of their music might shift. I went to an incredible jazz performance, and they're not always in flow, the performers, but you can see the shift when they are, and you can feel the difference in the magic. And so pay attention to that in yourself as well. I mean, I think a great question is, how does flow feel for you? I don't know even if you want to answer that, Linda, how flow feels for you
For
when
me,
you're
it's an
doing something you love.
expansiveness, it's an ease, it's a trust. It is, I don't know, it feels in my body like an energetic opening, like I am living in alignment with all that is.
Mm,
And I don't know, it just brings me such peace.
hmm
Where when in the other aspects of myself, right, it feels constricted.
Mm-hmm.
pushing, chasing, striving, which tells me, oops, you're out of the flow of life, right? Because you're trying to
Mm-hmm.
make things happen. Flow is allowing and trusting. That's the words I use to teach.
Yes, beautiful. Yeah. And for me, it also, I love that you use the word peace. Um, yeah, there's so many. I know we don't have time to go through all of them. There's so many beautiful stories in the book to that point. But just for myself, one of my favorite flow activities is doodling. And so for many months I chose writing, but then for 1 month I decided, I'm going to try something different. And I come from a long line of amazing artists, and I did not get the drawing gene. I did not get that gene. But when I doodle, I realize as I a day, day after day for 5 to 10 minutes a day, I started doodling, and I had forgotten that I had my own unique formula for doodling. And it was a game that I used to play when I would be listening to my professors in college and be in these big auditoriums, and it would be, hard to focus. And so, in the margin of my notebook, to help me listen, to help me lock in, I used to doodle, and my doodling often looked like um, the waves of they're curly and they don't cross. I play a game with myself where the lines can't cross, and I have to keep moving my pen and it's almost like when you're in a maze, try to draw in this way. So there's just enough challenge to keep it interesting. And what I realize is I fall into flow so immediately with the doodling. And I think one thing that really helps is that I don't care if people think I'm a good doodler. My ego has no attachment in the game whatsoever, whereas if I might be doing other forms of art, I might think, oh, I'm not as good as her or him but doodling, I bypass that all completely. And when I'm doodling and I'm in this state, I fall into flow immediately. It's such a deep form of meditation, flow for me. I feel such deep peace. It's almost like I can feel my energy dropping from that gripping that's just above the heart in the body and a tightness to down, 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 like lower in my body. All my muscles relax. And what I realized, I came up with this word, which is playful and fun. All of this, I have found if we reconnect to our child within that doesn't take things so seriously, that also is a very great way to access flow. And I came up with this word called floativate, which is those things that we do to help us find flow that are unique to us. And I found that doodling is a great way to floativate. And so now, before I do anything, before I came on this call, before I sit down to write an article, I doodle, and that helps me to connect with this deep feeling. So um, I think that to create more flow in our lives, I think it's really, really important to make it practical,
Oh,
because we talk about the universal flow and we know when we're struggling, but we can still stay stuck in the conversation about that and be really high up in our body and our brains. And I think if we can find those things, and this I don't think I know, because I've seen the magic of this. I've seen this happen for hundreds and hundreds of people and myself again and again and again. So I know it works. And it's that there is a direct connection between the biological state of flow and stepping into what you call universal flow. And it begins with activity. It's an actual biological innate state for a reason. We have the formula to get our lives to flow, and it begins with picking up the pen or picking up the paintbrush or getting on the swing or remembering what you did as a child that brought you joy and doing it for 1 minute for 60 seconds. And then your body will start to remember and remind you how to experience more of that. And this is directly related to how neural pathways form in our brain. They start with baby steps. They start with 1 minute a day. They start with a softness, not a rigidity. Because what happens in the flow state, which is so amazing, is that when we're in flow, the parts of our brain that rule the inner critic, that rule the ego, they go offline. They literally do not light up. And so by, swinging for 1 minute or by dancing, one of my favorite things to do is to just put on the Pandora Best Day of Your Life, a music channel, and dance to one song, which is usually about 3 minutes, and just follow where my body wants to lead. Don't worry, it's in my kitchen. Nobody can see me. Don't worry about what people think. To create a safe way to experiment with flow, where you don't have to worry at all about what people think, that you're not engaged in that conversation at all. And that is how the flow habit forms. That's how we help ourselves kinesthetically to develop flow and create flow miracles in our lives, because we're all on board. Our whole body is on board. Our brain is on board. Our inner child is on board and part of the leadership team. We're playful. We use words like floativate. We let ourselves choose activities that don't seem practical at all. And those are the ones that are actually going to open something up inside of us so that we go out into the world sparkling and playful and fun. And we have that magnetic energy about us because we're talking about something, or we're doing something, or we're living our lives from this passionate state and that is so powerful. Nobody can take that away from us. And it doesn't start from the brain. It starts from that inner child. It starts from play. And that's all inside us already. That's the beautiful thing, is we were all children. So that's in you. Nobody can ever take away from you that you already know right now in this moment, your unique formula for flow. It's in there. You just have to find your way to reclaim it. And that's what my book is all about. I mean, I wrote it, I love, Linda, that you said that, when you opened it, you felt the energy, because I put so much energy in how I created the book, so that not only does it have hundreds and hundreds of footnotes. I researched this book for 6 years, but it also has stories. So if you don't see yourself in my story, that's okay. There's another story in this book that might ignite a sparkle, and it's filled with tips and facts and experiments, flow experiments you can try, ways you can uncover your own strategies to floativate. I put so much energy in making it a really practical handbook for reclaiming what you already know.
Mm. I got to tell you, that's what I feel in the book. And I love all the exercises and everything that we can incorporate in, because to me, nothing changes without inspired action. Inspired means from spirit, right? So it's like take action, get into the divine flow of life. We're going to take our final break and come back for the last segment, my friends. And if you're ready to step into flow, grab a copy of The Flow Habit at lauriesmith.com and learn more about the soulful work she's doing in the world. We'll be right back.
We are experiencing a major, unsettling, energetic shift in the world. We're each here to play a part in this unfolding, not as a victim of change, but as a leader guiding us through this major transformation. Did you know that everyone is designed to be a leader? You're being called to step to the forefront of your life. Whether you're leading your life or others, it's time to step to the forefront, out of the shadows, and lead with your light. Intuitive human design coach Nancy O'Keefe's book, Lead with Your Light, Individual Empowerment, Influence, and Impact with Human Design, will help you gain a deeper awareness of who you came here to be and align yourself with the new energy that is rising in the world. Grab your copy today at leadwithyourlightbook.com.
Welcome back. You're listening to Inspired Conversations. Today we're talking about flow, everyday miracles, and floativate. So one of my, we'll watch the time on this last segment, but could you quickly identify those 4 steps of getting into a flow state so I make sure we capture those?
Absolutely. So they correspond to the acronym FEEL, which reminds us to feel our way into flow, not to think our way into flow. And the first is focus. And the question with focus is, what is my top priority in this moment? And then the second is E. The first E is engage. And this is the one that often gets missed, but it's what can I do to make this more fun and meaningful for me? It brings it back to intrinsic motivation and what sparks your light. And then the next E is equalize. And this comes from my scuba diving days, where when we scuba dive, we have to equalize the outer pressure of the water with our own inner airways. And so it's finding that sweet spot so we're not being too hard on ourselves, and we're not bored. And so the question for that is, do I need to lighten up a little? Or do I need to push myself harder? Do I need to challenge myself more? And then finally, the L is listen and let go. And these are sort of a one and the same action. And this is where we become willing to become partners with flow and follow where we are feeling guided to go. And also staying very closely attuned to the listening is where is flow guiding me, and how can I let go and follow? So those are the 4 simple steps to flow, and they're a great way to live our lives too. I find that, if I ever feel stuck, just by asking that first question, what is my top priority in this moment, kind of brings it back to home, right? And then we can start to, um, almost like a domino effect, we can click back into that flow within ourselves.
One of the things you shared too is, first off, I love that acronym because as soon as you hear the word feel, there's a vibration to that. And then as you broke it down, I wrote them all down. I was like, when you see that acronym feel, it's like, okay, get out of your head right now, Linda. Come
Hmm.
drop down. That's the first thing I felt when you said the acronym. And then as you went through it, when you said engage and make it fun and meaningful, I think so many have forgot what fun means,
Mm.
because so many of us, and I've been there and can still fall into that state, are so in our heads, we're not even present in our own lives, that we don't know, we've kind of forgotten
Hmm.
that childlike energy. And so I
Hmm.
love that your book is reminding everyone that within you is all that innate wisdom and truth, because you were born with it. As child, you lived it and experienced it. And then as we grow into our adulthood and life gets lifey, we become disconnected from that truth. So I see your book as a soulful reminder for us to come back to center, to come back to that joyful part of us that many of us have forgotten.
Mm. Thank you. Yeah. That's really what it's all about, is the playfulness, and remembering the sparkles, and following the sparkles, and remembering that we have sparkles, right? I mean, I think sometimes when we get stuck and we feel stuck, just that alone can help shift our state. And in my coaching, I remind people, you have a spark, you have a unique gift that no one else on the face of the earth has had, or ever will have again. So even when there are, hundreds of people coaching, or hundreds of people, making widgets or whatever it is, no one can do it quite like you. And the key to our success, and the key to creating miracles and magnetizing those soon to be new best friends to us, is all about connecting with that sparkle, that sparkly, playful, fun part of ourselves. And we don't have to think our way into it. We can experiment, and we can try a flow activity and say, you know what? That didn't work for me. Swinging on the swing, I started, my 28-day flow challenge, and started swinging on the swing, and it just doesn't do it. But my doing it helped make me remember how much I love to paint, and so I'm going to get a box of watercolors from from CVS, and I'm going to start to just play around with watercolors today, and then see where that leads us, and it can be playful and fun, and the key is leaning into softness. I do 28-day flow challenges still. They're still free. People can sign up on my website, and I send out an email every single day for 28 days. So you have support as you do this if you want. And each email has a word of the day and a question of the day. And the word that people resonate with most is softness. And I think that kind of sums up the best way to find flow is through an energy of softness and playfulness and being like, you know what, I'll try this and experimenting, and curiosity. And that's all what I call the flow mindset, which is in the book. But yeah, it's just about going through life from one little flow miracle to the next and being playful about it, and
And that
reconnecting with
word
that
too,
joy.
curiosity, is a big one, right?
Yes.
Because we can become so close-minded and stop stop stretching ourselves into like the beauty of life. We think, okay, this is who I am, this is what I do. And we kind of like put blinders on, like the horses. I grew up with horses, and I used to always say to my
Mm-hmm.
family, why do we have to put them? It's like so they can block out everything else and they can stay focused ahead.
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes we get into that rut. So when you said curiosity, it really spoke to me because I have grandchildren now. One's 14-year-old girl and one's 25. And my 14-year-old granddaughter, we call the little goddess.
Mm-hmm.
And she is the most magical, mystical, creative soul,
Mm,
a child or adult that I've ever met. And
mm,
she has no fear about trying new things. And in the last, I'd say, new things to create. And I'd say in the last 4 years, I've been witnessing and watching that and saying, okay, look, how many of my clients are always complaining or mentioning that they feel disconnected from their creativity or flow? And I'm like, the difference is she's willing to be curious.
mhm,
And I think a lot of us adults are become so set in our ways that we lose that desire to be curious.
mhm.
And I think that closes us off from so much.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think it's great to remember that we have many parts. I talk about that in the book a lot. And while our goal is to reconnect with that peace, that experience of our true self, or what I call the flowing self, these other little parts pipe up, but they're just parts. They're not our identity. And it's important to remember that that child is within us, and that is one of our parts. In the research I did, I interviewed a lot of kids about flow, and they hadn't heard of the word flow or flow state before. But when I said, it's that feeling we get when we're so into what we're doing that we lose track of time, they light up and they're like, oh, I know that. And I say, oh, well, what does that feel like? Or how do you do that? And they know exactly how they do that. And all the stories are in the book about, ways they make what they're doing a little bit harder and a little bit harder and a little bit harder, to engage themselves. And if it's too hard, ways they make it simpler, or ways that they just do what they do in that magical way that only they can do. And I like to remind all of us, we have that within. It's not gone because we're whatever age we are. It's within us, just like this flowing, peaceful experience is within us, ready to be tapped, and that there is no one way that anybody can teach us. But it begins by asking ourselves those 4 questions. And it just begins by being willing to play and experiment and notice. There's such a connection between emotional intelligence, which is self-awareness and knowing how we're feeling, and flow. And the more we come to know ourselves in a really deep, accepting way, we can be more compassionate with ourselves in those moments that we are stuck, and know that, I like to think when we're feeling stuck and when our ego is screaming loudly, I like to think back to that safer flow cycle that I mentioned. And I like to think about, wow, that just means there's a creative breakthrough coming, because we're not meant to stay stuck, and if we just accept how we're feeling in this moment, look out world, look out, all the joy and bliss that could be ahead, where we just experience the moment and we enjoy the moment, that E in the safer flow cycle, and all those miraculous moments that are going to happen. And no, we're not going to stay in that state all the time. We're going to need to rest. we're going to need to be quiet. We're going to need to listen to what's growing and where we're being called to flow next. And that's all part of it. But even just a beautiful reframe, if anybody is listening right now and you're feeling stuck, how about, if we reframe that? This is a trick I use a lot in my own life. It's like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited because that means that soon, I'll be flowing again, because what comes after stuck is that experience of enjoying the moment and flow and miracles. So this is just a sign that something good is about to come.
I love that reframe. Excuse me. So one of the things that you just said is, about us being stuck.
Mm-hmm.
That reframe takes us out of the energy of what is and puts us back into the field of possibility, which to me is flow. So I love that reframe for anyone because we all go through that,
Mm-hmm.
right? Those moments. We have 1 minute left. I want to share. Are you hosting a 28-day flow challenge now, or can they get the details right on your website for the next one?
Yes. So whenever you're listening to this, I do periodically throughout the year host these where we go through it all as a community and all of us are on day one on the same day. However, what I have on my website, I swore when I saw how much these were changing people's lives during the pandemic, I swore that I would always offer these for free for as long as I possibly could. And so on my website, Laurie Smith, LaurieSmith.com, on every subscription box, if to sign up for my newsletter, there's a little checkbox and it's self-guided flow challenge. And if you want to receive the 28 emails, you just click that box and you can hit reply to any of those emails and share your story with me. I want to hear what activity you're choosing, what your intention is for doing it. And I am always doing these. Right now, in this month on Substack, I'm actually posting fragments from my own flow writing. So I'm always doing 28-day flow challenges, and I lead flow circles. So for those who are ready to take their journey with flow deeper, I lead group coaching containers that are just for 1 month at a time. And each
That's
month we
wonderful.
have a different theme. But people, and the other thing is also, if you want to find out more about what I'm offering in my book, and you can also just type in the flow habit into Google or my name, Laurie Smith Flow. Everything I do is called the Flow Habit. My podcast is called the Flow Habit. The book is called the Flow Habit. If you can't remember my name and you want to find me, theflowhabit.com will also take you to my website. So there's lots of ways to get in touch, and I'm
I want to.
really passionate about sharing this with as many people as I can.
I am so excited for everyone to take advantage of all your sacred offerings and especially grabbing a copy of your book, The Flow Habit. Laurie, thank you for joining me. I am honored. And until next time, my friends, choose love, choose joy, choose happiness. Blessings, everyone.
Thanks for listening to Inspired Conversations with publisher Linda Joy. Join our sacred space every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern and meet leading female visionaries, empowering authors, heart-centered female entrepreneurs, coaches, and healers. Inspired Conversations with Linda Joy is a soulful venue where guests share the obstacles they've overcome, along with wisdom and lessons learned on their personal journey that led them to the transformational work they do in the world. Inspired Conversations to empower you on your path to authentic and soulful living.